The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic Authority, or craftsmanonline.com.
Hey, welcome back to the Craftsman Online Podcast, the only Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. I'm your host, Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce, and we are at the final episode, at least our last guest episode for 2025. Geez, season 5, where did that go? Amazing. Before we get started with our guest this week, I want to thank all of you who have decided to jump up and support the show on Patreon. I really do appreciate that. We're pushing for 20 new subscribers to close out the end of this year. You can join us on Patreon at Craftsman Online Podcast. We got a 7-day trial for you to see if it's a good fit. Just $5 a month. You get ad-free episodes, plus access to all of our subscriber extra episodes, which is basically extra time with some of our favorite guests, like this week's guest. You can start your free trial by opening up the link in the notes for this episode. Well, it's always interesting when you get a guest who calls himself a Masonic has-been. Turns out to be he's one of the more forward-thinking Masonic educators today. He's a past master of the Ohio Lodge of Research, a founder of the Royal Scofield Society for the Grand Lodge of Ohio, and a Right Worshipful Brother. We're happy to have him on as a first-timer. Brother Chad Kopenski, welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast.
It is an honor to be here. I'm kind of sequestered in Ohio at this point, and so the only way I get to get out is usually electronically this way.
Same thing, dude. I can't tell you how many brothers I have virtually met, and then when I do get a chance to actually see them in person now, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, it's crazy, this new way of making friends. The concept of rethinking ritual, just hearing your background story, now knowing more about your passion with the craft, your professional, skills all marrying together here. When I started going through your deck, I was really kind of impressed that you compare your framing devices. You're comparing Masonic ritual to a family's Christmas dinner. And that's a fantastic analogy. I never would have ever thought that before. Can you walk us through this and why is it such a powerful statement?
I think that our brethren have sort of lost the idea of what ritual is supposed to be, like what the purpose of our ritual is. We think about it as this performative thing. We think about it as this thing of like, I have to go there. I have to get my words right. I have to. And I want brethren to just take a second and think about it differently. And I want them to think about our ritual like it's Christmas dinner. In most families, it's one of those things where people come together at one time. And there's certain things that only happen at that time, right? The good china comes out. You dress up, certain foods happen, certain stories get told, certain traditions happen. There's both a descriptive and a prescriptive element of this. The story that I use to kind of frame this all is my twin sister bringing her then boyfriend into my family, having him go through 3 different family events. My other brother-in-law sort of took him aside and said, all right, here are the players, here's the things you need to do, here's how you're going to get through this particular event, here's the stuff you need to know. All right, we got you. Go do. We do these things at these times and only these times. As a descriptive element is to say, this is who we are. These are the things that we value. We value these stories, these items, these things. But it's also a prescriptive thing. If you want to come into our family, you got to know what you're getting into. You got to know that we value these items. We value these ideals. We value these times, these moments, these stories, these people. And we do those things because what we are doing is we are forging, maintaining, and celebrating these meaningful connections that transcend things like time, distance, and death. And so what that means for us as Masons, we need to stop thinking about our ritual as lifeless. We need to think about it like a Christmas dinner. We are bringing somebody into our family.
It's the performative part of the ritual. You're putting in the meaning of the ritual, but also you're injecting your lodge's DNA, that culture, into the new brother, the candidate that's coming through. And now you're showing them how to be a Mason. And it's a conversation I've had. I need to start writing my theories down. There's like the way to do things, and then there's the way to do things. And of course, our ritual says this, but the way that we perform it and talk about it, that's the Masonic education part. That's how we're transferring that knowledge to the next guy.
What I also talk about in this is that, like, what's the purpose of our proficiencies? We think about it as like, I'm going to teach you this ritual and you better learn it. No, 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 no. Think about a proficiency like you are walking through your mom's house or your grandmother's house and looking at the pictures on the wall. The proficiency is a way for us, it's a mechanism for a brother to talk to a new brother and teach him how to be a Mason and how to be a Mason and a member of that lodge. The proficiency is just the mechanism, but the intention behind it, the purpose behind it, isn't just being able to recite that catechism word for word. It's so that, when the guy I'm mentoring says to me, well, hold on, what does this mean? And we talk about, well, here's what that means, and here's what I think it is, or man, I don't know. Let's go find this out together. One of the best conversations I think a lodge can have. I said, brethren, I want you to think about your EA degree. Tell me a moment that is really important to you. It really sticks with you. And the brethren start talking about it, and they all have different things. For me, when they brought me in and somebody said, arise, follow your guide, and fear no danger, for a second, I thought to myself, hold on, nobody talks like that. And that means that probably more than likely that there have been generations where they realize that this is kind of a weird thing, what you're doing, being blindfolded and less than clothed and in a room where it's really uncomfortable. For me, that's the moment that means a lot to me. And so as I'm talking to the brethren, I'm like, I really want to make sure that our candidate kind of has the same sensation that I do. And another guy will say, you know what it was for me? When they put the apron on me for that first time, my dad did it. And when he did it, he just yanked on that string. And I felt that weight or that pressure of the apron around my waist. And I understood, especially with what they were saying, that I was now bound. As a lodge, we're like, whoa, that's awesome. And as we talked about this, now we think, okay, well, how do we make sure that our new guys coming in, that they have a similar experience? When the education officer talks to them afterwards, let's talk about why we did that. This is something that we value as a lot.
Well, you kind of provide some stair steps for brothers to follow in your program because it's built around the 3 pillars of intentional ritual. And you make some key points. I want to hit the first one here, which is know your role. And this is really for the officers, the brothers that are there, the degree team. What do you mean by know your role? I'm guessing it's more than just know your part.
There's nothing passive about our ritual. It drives me nuts when I see a third of the guys get up and leave the room right before the lecture starts, or they're on their phone. Or the one that bothers me the most is when they start practicing, their ritual while everything else is going on. I'm thinking, if you are an officer, right, you have a role there during this, during the degree, kind of like a Christmas dinner, right? You're doing the cooking, you're carving the turkey, like you have a particular job that you need to do. But the candidate also has a particular role, right? They're the new guy coming in, and there's people around him to kind of keep him safe and make sure that things go well. But the people on the sidelines also have a particular role. If we do these things at these times to forge, strengthen and celebrate those connections that transcend things like time, distance, and death, that's what your job is on the sidelines. Your job is not to check out. Your job is to recognize that there's somebody new coming into your family. And that, in a way, I mean, this is the weirdest sort of, thinking, but that candidate at the altar is, in many ways, it's also you, right? You have to think about the time that you knelt at that altar, the experience you had, to remember what those obligations and those lessons were, to celebrate that there is this person coming into our family. If I were to tell you that we're conferring a degree tonight, how quickly can you come up with excuses that will get you out of coming to that degree? Now, if I tell you that Christmas dinner is tonight, what in the world are you going to be able to say to your mom or your dad or your siblings that will excuse you from being at that table? Once you realize, wow, sorry, we have a huge storm outside, and so
Okay, I was wondering what that was. It was like either it's my neighbors throwing their garbage cans up and down the road, or
no, we have a huge storm. Luckily, my dog isn't freaking out. I'm a theater person. This is all for effect. I brought this all for you. There's a great book that I think that everybody who considers themselves a ritualist should read. And it's a book called The Empty Space by Peter Brook. He is a theater practitioner. It's a series of essays about the nature of theater, the dangerous theater, the poor theater. And there's one that he calls the holy theater. And what he talks about is that in the holy theater, the actors know their lines, know what they're having to do so well. They've trained in such a way, and they're doing things with such an intention. If that special spark happens, that there might be what he called the quickening, where it's so amazing and so perfect that you pierce the veil and you glimpse the divine or glimpse the infinite. You have to know the words, like you have to know your lines. See, I'm talking about ritual in such a way. This is like, Preston and Webb, and it's not focusing on the words, it's focusing on the message. Right? I think so many brethren get so worked up on the words, and that's why they start saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, or they start messing up. If you focus on the story that you're trying to tell, right? What is more important? Is it more important that you tell the story of Grandpa with Harry Truman the way that I tell the story? Or is it more important that you tell the story about Grandpa with Harry Truman? Like, there's not any real one right answer. But when it comes to our ritual, in my mind, I'm thinking, I would much rather, as I'm talking to this, if I'm giving a lecture, if I'm helping, work with the other officers to create this experience for the candidate, I want to focus on the experience and focus on the story and focus on the journey, as opposed to whether I say harass or harass.
Let's get to the third point. You talk about focusing on the connections. And this part of your presentation I was really interested in, because here's the issue that we run in right now is this modern instant gratification society. And we have these guys coming in for this transformative experience, and we're trying to, make that connection with them, give them the best experience that they could possibly have. What's your advice on how we can focus on that connection during the ritual so that it's not transactional style of an experience? It's something meaningful.
So is Christmas dinner transactional? No, it is, right? It's that time that you get to spend with cousin Mike, you never get to see, and you get to just reconnect and retalk to him. It is that time to walk through your mom's house and be like, to hear those stories, to play, a card game with your siblings and to laugh and to tell it. And yeah, there's going to be fights, but honestly, those are some of the stories too.
Well, you have guys that are looking to be a part of something bigger than themselves. This has been a theme.
Okay, so we're doing all these things where we're doing these one-day classes, and there's nothing against one-day classes. There's actually a way to do them in such a way that they're useful. But instead of thinking about it as a destination, right? Like, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get something, I'm going to put it on a shelf. It's the idea of practice. It's the idea of making those connections. Why do guys stay? It's because of the guys. It's because of the experience. There are guys we talk to who live across the street from a lodge and they don't go, but they would drive 3 hours to a TO lodge or a lodge that really focused on education. Oh, wait a minute. So they won't cross the street for something that isn't meaningful, but they'll drive 3 hours for something that is. In some ways, you can't expect every single lodge to give you everything you need. So we realized that there were guys who, yeah, they live across from a lodge and they go there because, well, on Thursday nights. But when I really want to see a good degree, I want to go over to this lodge because, man, they just do some great work. Or, man, you've got to go to this lodge when they are talking about, this education series. And so for guys to realize what it is that is important to them, and then to find those lodges or those things that provide the experience. And that's why, honestly, for better or for worse, podcasts and conventions have done wonders. Because, like we said earlier, all of a sudden, people have access to things, to ideas they didn't, or connections they didn't even know before. And that's okay. So instead of feeling frustrated because there's a lodge that isn't giving you what you want, here's a way to get what you want. By focusing on the connections. And what I mean by that is understand what our rituals for and what our proficiencies are for. Don't just yell at the guy to get those words right. I don't know. I always like to pair the newest entered apprentice with the oldest, crabbiest past master I can find. Right. Um, or how about this? As silly as it sounds, don't let anybody sit alone in your lodge. If somebody comes into your lodge, make sure there is somebody who sits next to them that's within about like 2 or 3 feet. In Ohio, we can do business in any degree, but there's certain things you can only do in fellowcraft, like a fellowcraft return. So you got to send an EA out in the hallway. Well, hell, have somebody go sit with the dude. We spend all this time saying, you're part of a brotherhood that will always be there, and like, oh yeah, but by the way, you can't see this, go out in the hallway. And as silly as it sounds, probably one of the best ways to think about this is just be Masons, meaning focus on the connections, focus on that experience. What kind of experience were you looking for and did you want coming into the lodge? When you are walking around the lodge and you see those things up on the wall, instead of when somebody says, who's that picture? You go, oh no, I don't know, let's find out together. Like, focus on the connections between the brothers and their community. For lodges that are struggling, one of the things I tell them about our ritual is if they're sitting there freaking out about like, well, that's great, Chad, you're saying these things, but I don't have enough guys to open the lodge. Fine, I get that. So with the guys you have, commit yourselves to one thing. That's really two things. Something internal and then something external. Something internal that's just for the brethren, just to, again, focus on those connections. Focus on, maybe it's dinner before lodge. Two really cool examples I've heard of, but there's so many that just think about the brethren of your lodge. What's something that's just them? Maybe it's t-shirts, right? They all have the same like lodges that they wear. But two cool examples that I love to death. There are masters in Ohio where the master and the senior warden stand inside the door and they shake a brother's hand as he walks into lodge. Like, hey, glad you're here. And then when it comes time to do the purge and say like, hey, it's time to start, they close the doors, take their seats, brethren, take this. And you talk about loneliness. Think about how many men go through their day without anybody actually making physical contact with them. But here's somebody who shakes their hand and takes a second and says, hey, man, I'm really glad you're here. It's a second, but just how much that means to that guy. And as a master and as a senior warden, how great it is just in terms of like controlling your meeting. I actually used to do this with my students. I would stand out in the hallway and like shake their hand as they came into class. It's amazing the stuff that would get solved before the bell ever rang. Is that, hey, Kopenski, I got to run and do this. Like, yep, go, great, thank you, good to see you. Like it. So The other cool thing that I saw, and it would take a very special lodge to do this, as they're closing, before they do the final wrap, they send all the visitors out, and all the brethren of the lodge come and they stand around the altar in a circle. And the master like reminds them of their, obligations and says, guys, all right, what's going on? Like, what's good, what's bad? And, sometimes guys will go around and say, like, yeah, things are going on well, like I got this, promotion at work. But then there are guys who at the meal before lodge are like, everything's great. But in that moment where they are just being brethren to each other, they're like, hey, my wife and I are fighting and it's going kind of hard. Or, I'm having this legal trouble. I'm not quite sure what to do or who to talk to. Or I just went to the doctor and I'm really worried about this. But this is this moment at our lodge where it's just us, the brethren, being there for each other. So that's something internal. And then something external. We talked about guys want to be useful, right? Guys want to be good on a good team. That's the other part I talk about when I talk about our ritual is, ask anybody who's ever been in a really good theatrical show or been on a winning football team, and they'll talk about it. Why? Because they were good on a good team, and that it's a moment that means something to you.
Have you ever watched the TV show The Bear at all on FX? It's on Hulu as well, The Bear.
I have. That's a hard show to get into sometimes. That's not really a comedy.
No, it's not. And I'm so thankful. It's refreshing that you have watched this show, because I'm going to make an analogy here. And you're talking about Christmas dinner and rethinking the ritual. It's the second season, the Christmas episode.
Yes.
Man, I was sweating and stressing watching that with the anti-family, just bad behavior that was happening there. So I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, the idea of making our lodge experience like a Christmas dinner, how do we start that? What's the one simple thing that we could try to put into place to get our brothers in that mindset of let's make our ritual like having Christmas dinner with the family?
The way that I started with lodges is you can either do this with the entire lodge, but honestly, I have seen most lodges be successful with this as an officer team. You get your main officers, you go out to dinner, or you grab a pizza, you sit at the lodge, and you start talking about what does it mean to be a member of this lodge? Like what? And if that's a hard question to start with the ritual. Guys, what's that one thing you remember? Like, if you were going to create like the perfect EA, like what's the one moment you want to make sure that we don't mess up? And then start that conversation. And then maybe start about talking about, well, okay, so what does it mean to be a member of our lodge? Like, what is it that is really important to us? Is it important to us that we all wear tuxes? Okay, well, then what is that? Is it important to us that we are out of here? But like, what does it mean to be a member of this family? Okay. And maybe it is a set of principles, or it is a set of ideas or questions. Or Ohio has a thing we use called the Roadmap for Improvement, and Michigan has something similar, and so many other places do too, of just like a way to talk about value. Identify what your lodge values. And that's not a conversation that only happens once. Because it's not something that you get perfect right away. It's something that's ongoing and developing. And if you're master, you're gonna get it. You're gonna take your thing 3 yards down the field. And it's not gonna pay off for years, but at least you've done your 3 yards and you have that kind of plan. Who are we as a lodge? What does it mean to be a member of this lodge? And how do we make members of this lodge? And focus on those connections. Tell the stories. Make them see Masonry the way that you do. But first off, maybe figure out what you guys as your lodge, but how do you see Masonry? What's important to you? And go from there.
It's the simplest question because it's the hardest thing to do is to start making that idea into action, and like, where do we begin? And that's the best thing, is like to get the leaders together and say, okay, like you said, what does it mean to be a member of this lodge? Like, what do we know that we can do? And let's just focus on doing that and being awesome at it.
I'm fascinated by this guy named John Shearer, who's this like lithographer from the 1800s. And I have been to so many lodges where they have this great Shearer print up on the wall. And I asked the guys, like, do you guys know what this is? They've walked by it 100 times. They have no clue. And here's this piece I've been looking for 10 years, that isn't supposed to exist, hanging on their wall. I'm like, do you not realize how cool this is? Be a tourist in your own lodge. I mean, all those things you take for granted. I mean, think about it like a new member. They don't know the stories. They don't know why these things happen the way they happen. So do think about it like this is your daughter's fiance coming to your house. Okay. All right, dude. At some point, this is all going to be yours. Let me tell you what it means to be a member of this family. Here's the grill. Here's where the tools are. Here's how we cook chicken. And, I'll sit with you and we'll figure this all out together, because better get that chicken right. Think about that way. Focus on the connections in the family, and everything else might not get fixed, but at least it'll be better.
Hey, if you've enjoyed this episode with Worshipful Brother Chad Kopenski, well, he talked about making the lodge kind of like a Christmas dinner. You get some desserts if you're a Craftsman Online Patreon subscriber. We will get some bonus time with him in a subscriber extra episode. You can join us on Patreon for just $5 a month, get ad-free episodes, and access to that full back catalog. The link to start your 7-day trial is in the notes for this episode. I'm Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Geez, next week we're going to start counting down the 10 most popular episodes for 2025. Until then, let peace and harmony prevail.